For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Shotgun Spratling for instant analysis of USC's first practice of its 2021 spring camp. Now, there is a caveat. The first practice actually hasn't happened. We did just finish the morning media availability with head coach Clay Helton, offensive coordinator Graham Harrell, and quarterback Kedon Slovis. But Shotgun, you and I will not be going to practice just because USC is going to the Elite Eight at the same time. So it's a little bit of a schedule conflict. So this is the one time when we won't see practice, but the logistics are kind of interesting this year. So tell the people how it'll work this spring camp.
Yeah, this is more like a instant analysis spring preview. We'll be able to go to attend practices on Tuesdays and Saturdays after today's practice. They will be practicing on Thursday as well. We'll have media availability in the mornings on each of those days, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So we'll be mixing it up with some live ghost notes on the P for our members, ghost notes as well from practice. We'll have some instant analysis from what we see at practices. Won't have one today just because of the logistics of the basketball team playing. And, it's hard for me to be in two places at the same time, like Indianapolis in this hotel room and also at the USC practice field. Wish they could have moved practice around a little bit, so the football team could be cheering them on as well. Clay Helton did congratulate Andy Enfield and the basketball team. That was his opening statement to the media availability today. So, they're hoping for the Trojans to win. Then on Saturday, the practice will be earlier in the day, so they would be able to see if USC did make it to the Final Four. They'd be able to watch it then for sure.
So it's kind of a half and half of what we'll be able to do. We'll be able to see a practice. We'll be on the pool deck. So we'll actually get to see practice instead of in fall where we just got media interviews, but we'll still have media interviews via Zoom. So it's like a mix of a COVID season and a regular season in that sense.
And it also seems like we'll be able to attend the entire practice instead of just 15 minutes and then having to leave, because it's the spring. Usually it's more fundamentals, it's more drills rather than game planning and whatnot. So they're going to allow the media to stay the whole time. So which would be really fun for us just to be able to get back out there and see some of the position battles. There should be some good ones. See who's developing, where guys are at, especially after this basically a year and a half layoff of not being able to see anything. So I think it's going to be really fun just to be able to get back out there and get back in the environment and see, hear the pads popping on a at least a twice weekly basis for the next 5 weeks.
Right. And instant analysis back on campus, or at least in the vicinity of campus, that will be nice too. But you mentioned development, Shotgun, and I thought that was an interesting theme throughout all three press conferences. It seemed like, given how crazy the 2020 year was in general, it seems like they skipped so much development time that you usually get in spring camp, even in the lead up to the fall season. And Clay Helton said getting the team ready for the 2020 season was a blur. So it seemed like this is going to be a key in this spring camp of just making sure that they're teaching guys and making up for the lost developmental time that they missed in 2020.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something I've tried to remind people of, especially when we talk about the offensive line and the potential of that group being better than it was last year, is that they missed all this time. And the fact that they had 4 guys on the offensive line that were moving positions last year. So when you look at the offensive line, you go, oh, they were terrible and it was all Tim Drevno's fault. You go, well, they missed out on so much time where they would have had a chance to develop, and that's what you need when you're moving guys around in particular. So I think it's going to be really big for that group, especially, but also for other groups, including Kedon Slovis. He talked about today about not having that opportunity. He had the confidence issues that he was dealing with, but just having, Graham Harrell said, you can go through all the reps you want in the meeting room and get them all right, but then when you're on the field, it's a much different experience. So he had one practice in the spring, and coming off that arm injury that he had against Iowa, he wasn't able to regain his confidence just in his throw motion and all that stuff. And I think that carried over a little bit into the season, and I think that's what we saw. So I think for him, it's going to be about getting his confidence back and being able to see the production on the field in practices. I think that'll be really big for him. But also you got 2 new quarterbacks behind him. How well are they going to progress and process things throughout the camp? So there's some interesting play at the quarterback position, but also there's several positions where we're going to be looking at the development of players. Even, we talk about this in kind of a broad term, but Clay Helton even mentioned special teams. Special teams is an area where they didn't get a chance to work on the fundamentals and some of the areas where they think that they can excel under Sean Snyder because of just the limited time, the fact that they, were able to come in. They had a fall camp, an abbreviated fall camp, but then they're right into game planning and stuff. So, a lot of things where, you go back to the building blocks, and they think they can do that much better with this staff that they have now on hand. So I think that's going to be one of the big things for them throughout this spring is putting things together from the developmental side.
Shotgun, you just pulled a Dan Weber and basically mentioned every topic that we want to talk about in one answer.
It all goes back to development, though.
True, very true. We're keeping this true spirit of instant analysis alive, so thank you for that. But going back to Kedon Slovis, that was something where I thought it was really interesting because he mentioned the younger quarterbacks, and he was like, I'm the older guy now, and he put it in quotes. And if you think about it, like he's had such a unique journey as a Trojan because he wasn't the starting quarterback. It was JT, and then he didn't get a full spring camp, and now he's coming into this like modified COVID spring camp in year 3. It's just been a unique journey for him. And I think that spoke to the confidence issues he was talking about. He said for the first time ever, he felt like he lost his accuracy in year 2. So it's kind of been a journey for him to come back to where he feels confident. And that was a big topic during his press conference.
Yeah, I got a chuckle out of the fact that he called them, they're great kids when he was mentioning Jackson Dart and Miller Moss. You know, it's just like, how old are you now? Like, it just seems like to us, it feels like he's still a young guy, Kedon Slovis, but, you know, this is his 3rd year around. And, you know, he's taken leadership of the program, of the team. And Graham Harrell talked about that. And that was one of the big things. He said that, you know, the development of the quarterback is them, you know, becoming a leader. And he saw that last year with him, you know, with them being able to win those games down the stretch, you know, in those tight moments, he was a leader and was able to step up when things weren't exactly going 100% correct for them. He stepped up, but now he's got to develop as far as the arm. He's got to develop as far as his confidence in throwing. And, you know, he worked with Tom House and the guys that they have there. You know, Tom House has worked with Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady and Drew Brees. And, you know, he's worked with all these amazing quarterbacks. So working with him tells you, you know, he should be able to take another step in his development there. And he says he's playing with more confidence throwing the ball, and he feels like his arm, you know, won't fatigue. And that was one of the things that he was concerned about last year is throwing, and then, you know, just not feeling like he could throw it in there with full strength and then having to worry about the next day how his arm was going to feel. He thinks that the way he's worked on his core, the way he's worked on some different things in his technique, that he should be much better at that. So that's a big development for USC, is to see where Kedon Slovis is at. Obviously,
yeah.
he walked off the field with help at the end of the season last season against Oregon. The last play he got hit on that and was banged up as well. So it's going to be big for him to come back. And if you can see him get into a rhythm, I think that'll tell you a lot about this offense going into next season, because that was the big missing piece. Even though they didn't run the ball well, when Kedon's throwing the ball well, it doesn't matter that much. Like the run game is just ancillary. So I think that adding him, you know, getting his confidence back, they can pick apart defenses. And then if they can start adding the run game in, it just becomes that much more dynamic of an offense rather than one that's kind of up and down, up and down. So I think that's a guy we'll be definitely watching all spring long, just to see how consistent he is. And if he's taking some strides, even if it's small strides throughout the spring to improve the offense overall.
Mm-hmm. You could tell that Graham Harrell and Clay Helton were excited to have 2 new quarterbacks on campus, Miller Moss and Jackson Dart. I thought it was interesting. Graham Harrell said because of COVID, he wasn't able to really go to campuses, high school campuses, and see players play and fall and whatnot. And Jackson Dart is a guy who his senior year was really important to his development. So how much do you think that will help to just see these guys on campus and get them in the system early?
Yeah, quarterback is the position where you want to get guys on campus early. It's probably the position where the most guys are early enrollees, just because it's so important to get in and learn the offense early. Now, USC's offense is not that difficult to learn the basics of. I think we've seen that with Graham Harrell infamously putting in, you know, the offense in 3 practices and then just redoing it over and over his first spring camp. So, but it's going to be interesting to see how they start processing and how they progress in their progressions. You know, as you're going through the offense, it's about finding that green grass. It's about, you know, doing the things, you know, being able to take your reads. Reads are sacred, as they always say in this offense. So, you know, how quickly can you start progressing in those reads? Are you able to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, or are you only making it to 2, or are you only making it to 3 before a pass rush is getting there? You know, how do they start developing that? That'll be big for them. So that's what this spring is all about for them. And you know, battling it out. Now, Clay Helton said, hey, you know, it's about competition, but we're not going to have them looking over their shoulder. those guys are going to be looking over their shoulder. Don't let them fool you. They're going to be like, all right, what did Jackson do today? Oh, what did Miller do today? They're going to be watching every rep because they're battling for that backup position. Now, Mo Hassan's going to be in the mix as well. We'll see how he looks. This will be really our first chance to see what he looks like. Because we didn't get to see them practice at all. So we'll see if he's actually should be considered a part of that competition or if he's just, an extra depth piece. We'll find that out after we see a couple practices ourselves to give you guys a better opportunity to know that. But also Clay Helton said that those guys have really developed their bodies already. Robert Steiner, the strength coach, Bobby Steiner, as Clay Helton called him, Bobby Steiner and the boys putting into work, so the strength and conditioning staff has been doing a really good job. Clay Helton said it's, that every workout is competitive. There's a competitiveness factor, mental toughness aspect. He says one of the better off-season program, one of the best off-season programs I've ever witnessed. So take that how you will. Clay Helton is saying it, but we have definitely seen the body transformation more so than I think we've seen in the previous years with those young guys coming in, how quickly they've been able to transform their bodies, and includes the quarterbacks. They don't think about quarterbacks and say, oh, they need to be buff or anything, but core strength is huge for quarterbacks because that ties back into the arm. It ties back into the arm fatigue. You talk about Kedon Slovis, but just be able to absorb hits. Kedon Slovis, his freshman year, we said it multiple times, how is he going to progress from freshman year on? It was putting some weight on because, he was taking some of those hits and just didn't have the frame. You need to add some weight, especially in the core area, to be able to take those hits, the blindside hits that can really be devastating. So I think that you're seeing some big strides there from the freshman quarterbacks already. Now we'll see what they look like when they get on the field.
Yeah, and we've heard a lot of praise for Robert Steiner and his strength and conditioning program so far. So I'm curious to see how that translates to the field in spring camp. Now, it seems like USC is taking the same approach they did last season when it comes to the offensive line, trying to figure out who the starting five is going to be. Graham Harrell said that they're just going to shuffle the best five and see who really fits. So what do you take away from that process and what Graham Harrell said, Shotgun?
Yeah, I think that's their philosophy is, hey, we want to find the five best guys and then figure out where they slot in best, what combination works best. But I think what's different this year is you thought that last year you didn't have time to implement that in a spring camp. You didn't have a time to shuffle guys around truly. So they want to move guys around. They want to see, okay, let's put Jalen McKenzie at left tackle. Let's see what he looks like there. Let's move this guy here. Let's move that guy there, and just see, okay, who works well with, which guard tackle combination works really well together. Jonah Monheim was a guy that Graham Harrell brought up individually. So he's a guy that said that he could play all five positions right now. Said he's even done some snapping at center and seems confident doing that. So look for him to be a guy that could be in the mix there and maybe a position we weren't expecting him to be at, whether it be, one of those tackle positions, whether it be a starting guard spot, who is going to step up and step into that role. We think it's just left tackle, but from the sounds of it, maybe there's a little bit more movement than we anticipate just because they want to see who works well together and find those top five guys, but then where they fit in best. So this was all in a response to a left tackle question, but he said the entire offensive line, they're going to shuffle some things up and see. Now that's something you always do in training because, you got to cross train guys just in case you have injuries or whatnot, but it didn't have a chance last year with one spring practice of helmets, no pads. Then, the abbreviated fall, you didn't have a chance to really work that out and see it on the field. So I think this gives them a much better opportunity. And again, I think development of the offensive line is going to be a really big key about how strong USC could be next season.
As far as injury updates go, it was kind of an interesting dynamic this morning because we talked to Graham Harrell first and we were asking him about USC's wide receivers and their playing time this spring. And part of his answer included, well, we'll see whoever is available and who's healthy. So, of course, we had to ask Clay Helton, well, who's available? Who's healthy? And it was a mixed answer. There's some bumps and bruises. Sounds like guys will ease into spring camp. So we'll see as far as that goes. Other injury updates, Jude Wolfe is still recovering from the foot surgery he received after that injury he suffered against Wazoo. Solomon Tuilapupu and Jordan Iosefa are still rehabbing from their knee injuries. And like we mentioned last week, Ishmael Sofsher had to have surgery for compartment syndrome in his leg over the offseason. So it sounds like he will be out for spring camp. And then Kyle Ford is still progressing from the knee surgery he had as well. Sounds like he will be limited. They want him to be full go and full speed for fall camp. So we'll see on that. But Chaka, what did you take away about the wide receiver semantics, if you will?
Yeah, it sounded like Brew McCoy has a hamstring issue, so he may not be ready to go initially. Clay Helton kind of identified them as bumps and bruises, which tells me that not anything that's serious is going to keep anybody out and should be any concern going into the season. Probably not anything that's going to keep anybody out for the entirety of the spring, but maybe guys aren't starting spring camp necessarily at the same time, whether it be a hamstring or whatever. I mean, the one thing I took out of it was the comments about Michael Jackson, the freshman coming in. A lot of positive comments about him from pretty much everyone today, and the work ethic that he has, and the fact that that he's catching attention already is something interesting, because you got other new guys there. You got Katie Nixon. You're talking about Brew McCoy, Kyle Ford, Gary Bryant Jr., Drake London. There's a ton of talent at that wide receiver position. For him to be mentioned by everyone today, I think that kind of stands out, that he's a guy to keep an eye on this spring in particular, but maybe even into the fall to compete for some of that playing time. I've said, I think Chris Ravino said this as well. He's kind of a poor man's Amon-Ra St. Brown coming out of high school. Does a lot of the same things, and he's a 4-star rather than a 5-star, and that's kind of the variance there. Don't know if he'll be immediately ready to step in like Amon-Ra St. Brown is, but maybe he eventually becomes a receiver like Amon-Ra St. Brown. So keep an eye on Michael Jackson III. He's a guy that I really like his skill set, and you love to hear the coaches talk about his work ethic and what he's done so far, and when he hasn't even got on the field yet.
Another guy that I noted during the press conferences was Gary Bryant Jr. That's someone who Graham Harrell said that he was mostly used in the slot last year, but now they want to move him both inside and outside. And the fact that Elijah Griffin, Tyler Vaughns, and Amon-Ra St. Brown are all gone to the next level, you got to find a guy who's going to be your returner. And Gary Bryant got some time last season, so he'll probably be another guy up and getting more time as a special teams guy. So just another guy to watch out for there too.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to not having that developmental time in the spring, being able to move guys around in the offense, moving from inside to outside. You just didn't have those opportunities to do as much of that. And back to special teams, you're going to be able to, one of the areas where they have to figure out is the return situation. With those guys being gone, is it now Gary Bryant's job to lose? Is he the punt returner? Is he the kick returner? I think there's going to be some other options there as well. So that's a position battle we'll be watching as well in the spring. I don't know if that one will be decided by the time they finish, because I think there's some more options that they can use later, that are coming in later. So we'll see where they're kind of at that. But it again goes back to development and having that extra time. That's what this spring is going to be all about, is about taking the next step in development, and missing that opportunity last year, basically going 8 months without being able to get on the field. Now, how can you take the next step this year from the shortened season that you had?
8 full contact practices out of the 15 and 3 scrimmages. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Shotgun, I feel like we've done like a mini podcast here, so I'm hesitant to ask you if you have any final thoughts, but any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I think that seeing Kedon Slovis, it just sounds like he's more confident in himself, and to be able to see him, if he gets back to where he was at, then that's a dynamic weapon for the offense. Those Heisman expectations for him coming into his sophomore year. Now he's going to have to do it with a different receiver group, different offensive line. Can they protect him? But if he's on his game, he can make up for a lot of those other deficiencies that you may have on your offense, because he can pick apart a defense with his own skill set, which is something he wasn't really doing last season when the ball wasn't coming out of his hand clean and he wasn't throwing the ball with a ton of confidence himself. So I think that's the biggest development here, is just seeing that Kedon Slovis seems more confident. And obviously we'll wait and see when we see him on the field ourselves. But, that's a positive development for them for sure.
The biggest development is development and future development, I guess you could say. But that's going to wrap it up.
I mean, it's spring camp. It's all about development, and the fact that they should have pretty much everyone out there, when a lot of times spring camp can be a kind of a hodgepodge of bodies just because of a lot of surgeries after a full season, minor surgeries. I think that's really big. It's going to be all about how well they can develop, and, the culture that they're building with Robert Steiner, Bobby Steiner and the boys, and the rest of the group there. How much can you build that culture going into the fall? And, we've talked about the schedule previously. It matches up pretty favorably for USC. So it all starts in the spring, though.
All righty, that's going to wrap it up for USC's first day of spring camp. For Shotgun Spratling, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.